has to be balanced chesed, meaning chesed that doesn't come on the back of someone else without negatively impacting anyone else.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rabbi Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Avracha. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayera, we know Avraham Avinu gives us an example of what it is to do true chesed in an extraordinary way. The famous episode when the angels who appear as men come next to his tent, he runs out to them to ensure they come, and he really goes out of his boundaries to give them an enormous amount of everything. A lot of bread, a lot of meat, not only regular meat, but he ensures to shecht for each one a different cow so that they each can get the best part of the meat, which is the tongue. Everything for their comfort. However, there is one exception. If you look closely in the psukim, when he gave them water, which is the first thing he offered to them, he actually is being very stingy about the water. As he says, Yukachna me'at mayim. Let a bit of water be taken to wash your feet, etc., etc. A question begs itself, why is Avraham Avinu being so stingy when it comes to the water? How does that fit together with him being a big Baal Chesed? What about the meat and bread? Question number 2. We know also in this week's Parsha, it says that Yitzchak, the son of Avram and Sarah, that they were waiting for so long, gets to a point after 24 months, tells us Rashi, that Sarah Imenu stopped nursing him. And at that point, they make a big feast for everyone. And a miracle happens that Sarah Imenu is able to feed all the babies of the town, whoever came to her, which is a huge miracle. And Chazal tell us, Rashi brings this down based on the Gemara in Bava Metzia. Why was this orchestrated? So that they can put a stop to all the rumors that are going out there that they're saying, there's no way Avraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu had a baby at this age. It must be they took some baby from the marketplace. Asufi lakhu ma'ashuk. And hence, to stop those rumors, which was very important to do, they had this miracle done, and Sarah Imenu was able to feed all the babies, and by that it put an end to this rumor. So Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein in this Sefer says that Reb Chaim was asked, why this seems to be a very important event? Why didn't they orchestrate this event to happen way earlier? A couple months after Yitzchak was born, even a couple weeks after he was born. Why did they wait for 24 months, and only once Sarah Imenu stopped feeding him did they orchestrate this feast? Rabbi Sachar Frand brings the famous story about Rabbi Yisrael Nisalant, who was the founder of the Musar movement, and he tells us, and there's a story about him. The story was that at one point he came to a very important person and he came to eat there, and when he washed his hands, Netilas Yadayim, before eating bread, he only washed up to the point where the fingers meet the palm. And the person that hosted him was very surprised. How did he not adhere to the most preferred practice of pouring the water on the hands up to the wrists? After the meal, he asked Rabbi Yisrael, what's pshat? Why did you do it that way? Why didn't you do it the best lechatchila way? And Rabbi Yisrael explained to him that it's very nice to be stringent and machmir and wash until one wrist. It's true. In ideal situations, of course, that's what one should do. However, that is all fine and good if one does not have to worry about someone else. But over here, in my case, I have to worry about someone else transporting the water. I'm not willing to be machmir on the back of someone else. Because in those days, there was no running tap water in Europe. Instead, there was manual labor to bring the barrels of water from their source to the private homes. And hence he was not willing, Rabbi Yisrael, to be stringent if it would mean someone out there would have to work harder. Says the Shemen HaTov, the same as the Pshat with Avraham Avinu. The reason he was stringent about the water, despite the fact that he cared so much about doing chesed, we know that was the midah of Avraham Avinu, chesed. We learn chesed from him in an extreme way, as is exemplified in our parsha. However, Avraham Avinu had his head on his shoulders and was able to mechashben everything. He realized, yes, chesed. Why am I doing chesed? I'm doing chesed because HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us to go in his ways and to try to mimic his midot. And one of his midah is chesed. But there's another midah of being Rahman, and I can't do chesed, I can't be machmir and be extra good in one thing if it means someone else is going to have to work hard, if it means that I'm negatively impacting another Jew, another person. And hence, as the Gemara in Bava Metzia tells us, that the water that Avraham gave them and offered them was done through a messenger, not him himself. And the second it meant someone else was going to have to work harder, here he said, just take as much water as you need. He didn't want them to have an over amount of water because that would mean his shaliach, the person that's helping him, would have to work really hard. Avraham Avinu had a clear kite. It was so crystal clear to him that the ways of Hashem that he wanted to mimic was, yes, on the one hand, chesed, but it has to be balanced chesed, meaning chesed that doesn't come together on the back of someone else without negatively impacting anyone else. With that, the same idea we can use to answer the question that Reb Chaim was asked. He was asked, why did they wait 24 months before doing this big feast where Sarah Imeinu proved to everyone that everything about them having Yitzchak at such an old age was a miracle by showing everyone she could feed all the babies in town? Says Reb Chaim, we all know there's a famous Rambam. The Rambam in Ishus says that if a woman wanted to also feed another baby, not only her own baby, her husband has the right to stop her from doing so. What's pshat? That's because it can negatively affect her own son. Maybe he's not going to get enough milk that he needs to get. So Reb Chaim said, based on this, it's the same idea. Of course, Sarah was able to do chesed and feed the other babies. However, they could not orchestrate such a thing. It wouldn't be right. It would send the wrong message. First, you have to make sure no one's getting negatively impacted, especially your own children. You could be the biggest Baal Chesed and be Mekar of other Jews and doing unbelievable things. But first, make sure everything's okay with your family. It shouldn't be on their back. And that is the message that Reb Chaim wants to say, you see from here. That's what Shemen Atov says. Rabbi Fran wants to add a nice idea. He says, if you look carefully, you'll see one of the two biggest episodes in our Parsha that scream out the Chesed that Avraham Avinu did was number one, feeding the angels and doing Achnasas Oichim, being very hospitable towards them. And the other one was the second HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him he's planning to wipe out Sodom, which indeed he did. He then went and prayed and davened and did his best ishtadlus to stop that from happening. He didn't succeed, but he did try to do his best. Says Rabbi Fran, isn't it ironic that in both cases, it was a bit of a show? It didn't really make a difference because no one was on the receiving end. They were angels. They didn't really need to eat. They pretended to eat. So he didn't really give them anything. And also, after he davened and prayed so much, he didn't actually manage to succeed in his request through his prayers. So he says, perhaps this is a hint that the Torah is telling us. You think you're davening from someone else, it's only about doing good for the other person? You think when you're doing chesed for someone else, it's only about helping the other person? Of course, that's coming from a good place, and that's what you should try to do. But you should know it's changing yourself. It's having a positive effect on you, and perhaps that is another hint as to what's happening here. Avraham Avinu realized this, and hence he did all the homework that needed to be done to ensure he doesn't negatively affect anyone else before performing the chesed. And hence he reached such a high level. As opposed to Lot, where he also did chesed. We see in the Parsha several instances where he did chesed. He offered salt to the angels, and his wife got upset at that. He also did chesed, though, that reached an extreme low level. You see, he was not focused. All he cared about is giving chesed to the angels, but he did it in a way that was not balanced at all. He was willing to give everyone in Sodom to do whatever they wanted with his own daughters. How could he reach such a low level? Perhaps that's because his main idea was not to mimic HaKadosh Baruch Hu's midot, but rather to be known as a big Baal Chesed. And when that is your focus in life, everything goes out of balance, out of whack, and you can reach rock bottom. I want to tell you an unbelievable story my wife pointed out to me that was in Achim several months ago, and I think it screams out this point we're saying together with the point that Hashem runs the world. And the story goes like this. In a certain city in Eretz Yisrael, there was a regular Daf Yomi shir every day, and suddenly in the middle of one shir, there's a Jew that came in. He looked like a traditional Jew. He came in and he said, is it okay if I join the shir? And they said, sure. They gave him a front row seat, and he really tried to understand the shir, but the Rebbe of the shir, the Maggid shir, realized it was very difficult for him to understand what's going on. So he tried to make it easier, but that didn't help. So then, at the split of a moment, he decided, today I want to really share with you another Gemara. And it's a Gemara, not in our Masechet, but I think it's very important we all go through it. So he goes on to this Gemara in Bava Metzia. The Gemara in Bava Metzia says the following. It says that once upon a time, there's a person that threw rocks from his garden to the public area, to the public street. So Rishus Rabim. A Chesed walked by, a righteous tzaddik Chesed walked by and said, why are you throwing rocks from a place that's not yours? to a place that's yours. So the Rav of the Shir explained, what does that mean? What do you mean? His garden, the chatzir, is his. Why is he saying don't throw from a place that's not yours? That is the place that's his. And he answered, let me explain what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying, you think your house, your garden is yours? No one promises it's going to be yours. It could be that one day you won't have enough money, everything will fall, everything that you have, and you're going to have to sell your house. It's not going to be yours. The public domain, the public streets, the public parks, that's always going to be also yours because you're also going to have a chelik in it. So how can you take rocks and throw it from a place that's not even going to be yours necessarily in the future to a place that will be yours? Why are you throwing rocks into a place that's going to be yours? The Gemara goes on to say that indeed this person that lived in this house eventually lost everything he had and had to live or walk a lot being in the public domains, and he himself got hurt by the rocks that he threw. The Rebbe of the Shir continued to say, there's a deep idea behind this. You think that when you're throwing rocks, that means you're not sensitive to others, and you should be sensitive to others and not throw rocks to where people walk. The Rebbe of the Shir explained, being sensitive to others is not only in favor and for the benefit of the others, it's actually in benefit for ourselves as well. When I always think about the other person, at the end of the day, I will benefit from it myself. That's what he said. That was the shir, which is very similar to the idea we're saying right now, that when you do chesed, it actually changes you and makes you a better person. The guest that came to the shir, he really liked the idea and he was very happy because he had this other friend. This person's name was Avi. He had another friend that he met once a week, and this other friend was close to a Chabad person that always told him Divrei Torah. So when they got together, aside from just exchanging various experiences, he was telling him always, this friend of his told Avi a Dvar Torah that he enjoyed. So that's why he decided to come to this shir now. So maybe through this shir, he'll have a Dvar Torah himself to be able to say. And indeed he had. So he was very excited and happy. And the next time they met, he said, Avi, is my turn to tell you a shtickle Torah. I want to tell you something we can learn from. And he said, I went to this shir, and this is the story I heard. It says in the Gemara about the person throwing rocks, etc. And he said everything, repeated the whole idea. And he said, from here we learn that when you take care of others and are sensitive to them, you're actually taking care of yourself. That's the deep idea over here. His friend, we said, what? So he said to his friend, what? Only when you hear from the Chabad Rabbi at Dvar Torah, it's good. When I tell you one, it's not good. He goes, no. I'm in shock that Hashem orchestrated that you tell me this Dvar Torah right now. And he said, let me tell you something. There's a yeshiva that is right next to my house. This is what Avi is telling his friend. And it started a long time ago. And I have a big house there with a pool that hasn't been used for a very long time. And I decided maybe to start a business where I'll have a public pool in my big garden. I'm getting all the rights to be able to do it and everything's great. Suddenly last week came up to me the Rosh Yeshiva and said, listen, I understand you have all the rights to do the pool, but you understand that this is very difficult for us. We have a yeshiva of Bachurim learning Torah all day. The whole atmosphere of the street's going to change. It might even not be so modest for people to come here to the pool when we're learning right next to you. It might affect the Bachurim. Please, can you try to decide not to do it anymore? Not to have the pool here. It's not matim. I'm willing to compensate you, please. But Avi says to his friend, I said, no, I decided I'm doing this pool. It's my private territory. I can do whatever I want. But says Avi to his friend, now that you've said this to me, and Hashem orchestrated that I hear this, I understand that perhaps I'm making a mistake. And eventually, indeed, how Hashem orchestrated that this person will go to the shir, because he also wanted to say a Dvar Torah back to his friend Avi. And Avi heard this. And at the end of the day, he was planning to make a pool, to create a pool there. And this stopped him from creating the pool. It affected him, and he stopped. And through this person going to listen to a shir Torah and hearing the story, it eventually put a stop to this idea of having the pool, which ensured that the yeshiva will be able to continue to exist in a tahor kedusha manner. We should learn from this story and the shtickle Torah that yes, chesed is important, but it shouldn't be on the backs of anyone else. And doing chesed the right way, we are actually not helping others only, but we are helping ourselves. Happy Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of The Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.